In late 2025, a series of events in Nepal sent absolute shockwaves through its economy and triggered a massive political crisis. It was a movement led by the youth, by Gen Z. So, what pushed this generation to the streets? And more importantly, what does it all mean for the nation's future? Let's break it down.
Okay, just look at these numbers. It tells you so much of the story right away. In August of 2025, foreign investment pledges were humming along at almost 9 billion Nepali rupees. Then, September happened. The protests hit, and in just 2 months, that confidence absolutely fell off a cliff. Pledges dropped to a tiny fraction of what they were. That's a huge red flag, showing that international investors got scared, and they got scared fast.
And this is the reality behind those plunging numbers. This isn't just about spreadsheets and data points. We're talking about real businesses, real jobs, and people's livelihoods literally going up in smoke. This image really captures the physical destruction that was fueling all that economic panic.
Which brings us right to the main question, right? What on earth could cause this level of chaos? How did things escalate so incredibly quickly?
Well, it all starts with the group at the very heart of this movement, Nepal's Generation Z.
So who are we talking about here? This is a generation that grew up online. They're digitally fluent, using platforms like Instagram and Discord to organize, to mobilize, and to fight for a future that they increasingly see as being stolen from them. So this wasn't just any youth protest. This was a highly connected generation's desperate cry for a real economic future. The final straw, the spark that lit the whole fuse, was a government-ordered ban on all major social media platforms. For a generation that uses these tools not just to talk to their friends, but for work, for education, for everything, this felt like a direct attack on their entire way of life. But here's the thing. That social media ban, it was just the tip of the iceberg. The real fuel for this fire had been building up for years. We're talking simmering anger over a system that young people felt was completely rigged against them, from huge corruption scandals to the dominance of Nepo kids, the privileged children of the political elite, all while nearly 1 in 5 young people couldn't even find a job. And if one number can tell the whole story, it's this one, 800,000. That's roughly how many young Nepalese leave the country every single year looking for work. It's a staggering figure. It's a massive national brain drain, and it's all driven by this profound lack of hope and opportunity at home. This is the desperation that finally spilled out onto the streets.
So now let's turn to the consequences. Let's really look at the devastating economic price tag of these protests.
The total estimated economic loss is just mind-boggling. Over 210 billion Nepali rupees. It's a number so large it's hard to even wrap your head around, and it represents a severe, severe blow to the entire national economy. So to put that $210 billion into perspective, it works out to about 3.5% of Nepal's entire annual GDP. In other words, the unrest single-handedly wiped out nearly half of the country's projected economic growth for the year. It was a massive national setback. And if you look here, you can see this wasn't just random vandalism. There were specific targets, major employers and symbols of the economy, from Bat Batani, a huge local supermarket chain, to international brands like the Hilton, to essential services like banks and telecom companies. The destruction was incredibly widespread and systematic. But the damage wasn't just about the broken glass and burned-out buildings. The protests created a much deeper, much more long-lasting problem, a complete and total collapse of investor confidence. And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from a leader in Nepal's business community just says it all. If your own local investors are scared and feeling insecure, why would any foreign investor ever risk their capital there? It's a powerful statement about the loss of faith in the system's ability to protect them. Now, this is a really crucial point. What made this crisis in Nepal so different from unrest in neighboring countries? Well, in places like Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, protests might shut down roads or ports, right? They disrupt logistics. But in Nepal, the protesters directly and systematically targeted private businesses for destruction. And that makes the risk for investors something else entirely. It's far, far more dangerous. So this crisis basically threw gasoline on an already smoldering fire. See, Nepal already had a big problem turning investment pledges, that's money promised from abroad to build things like factories, into actual on-the-ground projects. Now, with confidence completely shattered, that gap between promises and reality is threatening to become a giant chasm. So all of this, the anger from the youth, the economic devastation, the broken trust, it's brought Nepal to a really critical crossroads. And just look at how fast everything fell apart. I mean, we are talking about the span of 3 days. 3 days to go from protests to the prime minister resigning to the army being deployed on the streets of the capital. It was a stunningly rapid political collapse.
A former central bank director here really frames it perfectly. The protests weren't just some disaster, they were a wake-up call. He's saying that the path forward requires a serious, credible response to restore stability. Otherwise, the country risks being starved of the investment it so desperately needs to create those opportunities for its youth.
And this really leaves us with the final multi-billion-dollar question. The challenge for Nepal now is twofold. Can its leaders somehow rebuild trust with the generation that feels completely betrayed, and at the exact same time convince a deeply nervous global market that the country is a safe place to invest again? The entire future of the nation really hangs in that balance.